In 1212, tens of thousands of children set out from France and Germany, believing they could reclaim the Holy Land with nothing but faith. No weapons, no armies, just innocence and a promise that God would part the sea for them. But the sea never opened, and most of those children never came home. What began as a march of hope became one of history's darkest tragedies, a story of blind faith, betrayal, and lost innocence that Europe tried to forget. This is the true story of the Children's Crusade. The 13th century was an age obsessed with God and salvation, and drenched in war. For nearly 100 years, Christian Europe had been sending armies to the Middle East, each called a crusade. Each meant to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control. But by 1212, those holy wars had turned into something else: exhaustion, debt, and disillusionment. Tens of thousands had died. Jerusalem was still lost. The church, for all its power, seemed powerless to deliver the miracle it promised. Into that despair stepped the children. In the French countryside near the village of Cloyes, a 12-year-old shepherd named Stephen claimed that Christ himself had appeared to him disguised as a pilgrim. The vision, he said, gave him a sacred mission to lead a crusade of the innocent. No knights, no kings, just children, pure of heart, carrying the cross and the will of God. It started small. A handful of curious followers, other shepherds, peasant boys, and girls from nearby villages. But Stephen had something few others had in that age of fear: charisma. He radiated conviction. He promised that angels would guide them, that the sea would open for them, and that faith alone could conquer what swords had not. Word spread quickly. Soon, thousands of children left their homes to follow Stephen. They carried wooden crosses, sang hymns, and begged for food along the way. Chroniclers said their songs echoed through forests and valleys. Deus vult, God wills it. The same battle cry knights had shouted a century earlier, now rising from the voices of the poor and the young. When they reached Saint-Denis, north of Paris, the crowd had swelled beyond belief. Some said 30,000. King Philip II himself ordered them to go home, calling their mission madness. But faith, once lit, doesn't extinguish easily. Stephen refused. Many others refused. They turned south, marching toward the Mediterranean, believing that when they reached the sea, God would perform a miracle. Their journey was brutal. Hunger, exhaustion, and disease stalked them mile after mile. By the time they arrived in Marseille, only a fraction remained. They stood at the water's edge, waiting. They prayed, they sang, they believed. But the sea did not move. Then 2 merchants appeared, Hugh the Iron and William the Pig. They claimed to admire the children's devotion and offered them ships free of charge to carry them to the Holy Land. 7 ships set sail that summer. 2 were wrecked in a storm off Sardinia. The rest disappeared. Later, whispers said the merchants had sold the children into slavery in North Africa, trading innocence for silver. While France mourned, another movement was beginning across the Rhine. In Germany, a boy named Nicholas of Cologne began preaching the same message, that only pure faith could reclaim Jerusalem. He too claimed divine inspiration, and his charisma drew thousands. Children, beggars, and peasants from all over the Rhineland joined him, forming a second crusade of innocence. They marched through the Alps, driven by songs and desperation. Many starved, some froze. Villages closed their gates in fear, unwilling to feed another crowd of ragged pilgrims. Those who survived reached the port of Genoa. There, like Stephen's followers, they fell to their knees and waited for the sea to part. It never did. Some gave up and stayed in Italy, finding work as servants or beggars. Others pressed on south, still convinced God would reveal the path to Jerusalem. Few ever made it home. What actually happened in 1212 remains uncertain. The story of the Children's Crusade is woven from faith and myth, tragedy and rumor. Some chroniclers wrote that the Crusaders were truly children. Others believed they were simply poor wanderers, swept up in a mass religious movement. The truth may lie somewhere in between, a mixture of youth, poverty, and desperation, all searching for meaning in a chaotic world. The medieval chroniclers exaggerated freely, turning tragedy into allegory. Some said 30,000 marched, others claimed 100,000. Some insisted the sea swallowed them whole, others that slavers and storms finished what faith began. But behind the legends was something real, the suffering of thousands who placed their trust in divine mercy and found only human cruelty. By the winter of 1212, the Crusades of Stephen and Nicholas were over. The survivors limped home in silence, their dreams drowned in salt and grief. A few stories claim that some reached the Holy Land years later, but historians find no proof. Most likely those who lived disappeared into anonymity, scarred forever by what they had seen. Europe, however, did not forget. The Church condemned the movements as misguided zeal, yet preachers used the tale in sermons as a warning against pride. Artists, centuries later, turned it into poetry, song, and lamentation, a symbol of innocence devoured by the world. The Children's Crusade became a parable, a lesson about the danger of untempered belief, and about the human need to find salvation, even when salvation leads straight into ruin. The tragedy of 1212 wasn't that the children failed to reach Jerusalem. It was that no one stopped them. The kings, the clergy, the adults who watched and whispered, none stepped forward. They watched as the smallest among them carried the weight of a dream too heavy for the world. Centuries later, the story still feels painfully modern. Because we still send the young into impossible battles. We still confuse purity with power. We still hope that innocence can redeem the sins of the old. The Children's Crusade is more than a medieval legend. It's a mirror. It reflects the cost of blind hope, the cruelty of neglect, and the hunger that drives people to believe in miracles when the world offers none. They set out, believing they could change the world. They ended up proving how dangerous faith can be when it stands alone. No one knows how many died. No one knows how many were sold, or if any ever reached their promised land. But 800 years later, their story endures. Not because they conquered anything, but because they remind us that even the purest intentions can lead to the darkest ends. If this story moved you, subscribe for more true history that's stranger and sadder than fiction. Because history isn't just the story of kings and empires. It's the story of the people who believed, and what belief cost them.